All right, we are live with yet another live stream, starting on time this time. Um, yeah, I figured today I didn't have a particular headphone that I wanted to review. I mean, there's a bunch that are in the works, um, and they're getting their full review. So today is just a casual live stream, hangout, and chatting with you fine folks. But before we get started, as usual, I have left links in the description for anything to do with the headphone ranking list, as well as links to the forum for the headphone measurement index if you guys are curious about that, and of course the reviews and guide section up on headphones.com. But with that out of the way, let's dive right into the live Q&A. And honestly, guys, if you guys just want to start with here's what we'll do. We'll start with just general Q&A. Feel free to do ask for purchase advice too. We can get into that. But then halfway through, we'll switch it over to spicy hour. All right. So save your spicy questions for now. Let's just get into some general how's everyone doing kind of stuff. I see a lot of familiar names. Familiar. Well, I don't see your faces. That'd be weird. um, but yeah, let's just get going. I see Scott Pledger. I remember meeting you at Kanjam. That was awesome. Rob, good to see you. Chef Steve, of course. Familiar, yeah, a lot of familiar folks. Ace of Spades. I see some questions already. So, are you going to review the Bravura and Expanse? The Expanse is currently being reviewed by DMS, and DMS also did the Bravura. I might do the Bravura later at some point, but it is on my ranking list. It is in tier 1. I think it's excellent. No, it is not more comfortable than the Meze Elite / Empyrean. It is a little bit less comfortable than those. There's a little bit more clamp for me, but I think it's also okay for most people. So, yeah. But yeah, I haven't had the opportunity to do as many full reviews lately, just because I've been busy with just doing all that trip stuff. We're working on the Focal Bathys video, and that took up a lot of my time. But now that that's sort of released, I can now focus a little bit more on doing the reviews again. Hopefully. So there's a bunch that are in the works from me. I want to actually do a full review of the Radiance, because that one I only ever got to do a video on like a pre-production or pre-release version, which I think had different pads from what they ended up with for the production version. And there is an article up on headphones.com by FC Construct, and which is great if you're looking for that information. But I am also planning on doing a video on the Radiance, and then of course the Bathys video. I'm going to be comparing it against a bunch of other noise canceling headphones. So we're just waiting on that one to get a bunch of those other noise canceling headphones in. Like there's the Bowen Wilkins one. I think it's the PX8, I believe. Can't remember exactly the number, but yeah, that one. And then we'll try and compare it against. I'll see if I can get a B&O in. I know that those are they're of a similar price, if I remember correctly. Also high end. Then there's the Mark Levinson 5909, and we do have one of those. So it's more just I'm rounding a bunch of these up. Sennheiser Momentum 4, which actually I've been listening to, like I've been evaluating it recently. It's decent. It's pretty good, I think. It's a bit difficult to measure that one as well, but yeah. I think it's really quite good. But yeah, so that's kind of like what's in the pipeline for me. It's after that I'll probably be getting back to the regularly scheduled reviews. So yeah. Oh, and also these fantastic things here. The glory. The glory is real with the AirPods Pro 2. I'm not an Apple user, but they make me wish that I was. Sorry. Moving something out of the way here. There we go. Is that the Odyssey in the thumbnail? No. This is the Empire Ears Odin. Hold that up so you guys can see it. Cover my face. Do everyone a favor. It looks like the Odyssey. And no, I'm not saying Odyssey. But yes, this is the Odin, which is a fantastic IEM. I'd forgotten how well I listened to the Odyssey at Kanjam, and I was like, oh, I need to I need to get refamiliarize myself with the Odin because I need to I need to review that one. So hopefully that one is another one that's going to be done soon. I also want to do a video on the planar IEMs, like because there's been a lot of them recently. There's the one from Dunu that came out recently, the Talos, which is interesting. Looks amazing, but who knows if I haven't heard it yet, so I'm not sure if it'll be good sounding, but it looks fantastic. And then the Woozy Tan, I think that's how you say it. That one I do have in, and it's excellent. So yeah, I'll do a video on all them budget planars. Top 3 mixing and mastering headphones. Asking for a friend. Top 3. Honestly, if it's me, I just go with the K371. I know people are into the Bear Dynamics stuff, and sure, if you're using it with the recognition that is not neutral, that is specifically as a tool to make sure that your S's, F's, and T's are duller. it's like having a de-esser in the headphone. Then that's fine. But I would still go for a K371 there. But I mean, if you're looking like for the crazy high-end stuff, you can get. There's all kinds of stuff you can get. You could get an HD100S if you wanted to. That you can mix on anything as long as you know what the tuning is and what normal is supposed to be. How was Kanjam? Kanjam was excellent. The Odin always delivers an earful. Yes, it's large too. Does the Odyssey go to 11? Yeah, we'll find out. I'm going to compare the two. But the Odin's tonality is just outstanding. TechMed, thank you. Thank you. Do you have a question? Let's see if I can try and find that. Okay, yeah. If you have a question, let me know. Familiars back again? What does that mean? What up? Everest versus Philphone. For me, it was definitely Philphone, but I didn't hear them side by side. Everest, I'm not sure if that's actually a full release yet. Yeah. When I listened to the Everest, it was a lot better than the previous one that he'd had. So yeah, I think it was awesome to see that. What is the closeback equivalent to the HD600? Closeback equivalent to HD600. I don't know if there is one, to be honest. HD600. Yeah. I don't think there is one because with closebacks you often get a bass shelf of some kind. So maybe, yeah. Honestly, it's not crazy to say the Radiance because the Radiance has that kind of like 3K emphasis as well. If you think that's the defining character of the HD600, it's different enough in the sense that the Radiance is much bassier. Yeah, so it's not. But as far as the upper mids and treble is concerned, it's not far off. It's not as natural sounding as the HD600. So if that's a thing that you really are into, maybe some of those ZMFs, but those are also warmer, right? So that's why I'm like, I don't know about HD600. Let me know if you find one. Last Rhino. For tuning, honestly, maybe this, the Aeon X Closed or Aeon Noir from DCA, but that's still different enough in the sense that the tuning does also have the bass shelf. So, and also they're not as natural sounding as the HD600. So I don't think that there is one exactly. It'd be great if there was. Bath is very nice. Bathys, not Bathys. What open-back headphone would you recommend for $150 that's easy to drive? I think the 560S is around that price. Also, the HE400 SE isn't that hard to drive. if I remember correctly. I would choose between either of those two. Maybe HD 600. Yeah, that is a good choice for mixing. It's pretty darn like normal sounding in a good way, which is kind of what I think you would want for mixing. But again, it depends on like the person and what they're trying to do. You have the Celestia and iFi Go Blue, considering getting the Bathys to compare for office rig. Yeah, it's interesting because I think that's something with the Bathys that maybe people won't really understand is that it's almost more interesting to think of it as like a wired USB headphone with noise canceling because of the USB DAC function, and then you can also take it portably. Now, like on a personal level, I tend to like kind of split those up. Like I like my at home listening to be the wired thing, and my on the go listening to be, something like this. The convenience factor is pretty huge there. But I mean, like also there's no real contest there for sound quality. Um, but yeah, I can see it being that kind of like um, all in one solution for people there. YouTube is telling me that the current bitrate is higher than the recommended bitrate. Can you guys see the stream okay? Let me know if it's lagging for you guys. Well, yeah, I'm at 7,000. That's why. Oh, well. We'll deal with it. Um, will you be reviewing a demo of the Caldera before release next month? No, I don't have that on my radar. Does the HiFiMan HE6 SEV2 make the LCD X 2021 obsolete? No, they're different enough. They're very different in terms of how they sound. Yeah, the Zitian Wu. I had that backwards. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, those are good. The tuning is a little bit like ear gainy for me. Like it's just a bit much, but it's a lot better than what I was expecting. And also, it's weird. It's a planar, but like if you told me that it was a dynamic, I would have believed you. Like it does not have the same kinds of planar characteristics that I sort of expect. And I suppose in that sense, it's not as detailed either. But like it's not as much for instrument separation. But also like it doesn't sound particularly blunted. Like it sounds more technically impressive than the S12 and Z12. So yeah, it's interesting, that one. It's also better tuned, I think. But yeah. What are we talking about? What are we talking about? we're talking about headphones. Headphones, DACs, amps, all that good stuff. I always hear recommendation to mix on headphones. You know well, so you know how it should sound at the end. Yeah, I think that's probably true, but it also helps to have something that is a normal reference. Like, as an example, when I'm doing my audio adjustments, like I'm doing like a parametric EQ on audio tracks basically all the time, and any video editor knows that they have to do this kind of stuff, or usually you have to do this. And I remember like in the past, if I was wearing headphones that had a particular coloration, even if I knew that it had a coloration, my mixes would end up, or my like the parametric EQs would end up sounding kind of wrong on more normal sounding gear. And so I think it is worth having a normal reference point. Like I think that would be ideal. Now, whether you choose to use that as a mixing tool, like to try and deliberately curb a particular element of the frequency, spectrum, I think that's when you need to know, you need to, and make that decision like intentionally, not just like, oh yeah, because someone thinks it's neutral, like because yeah, those Bayer dynamic headphones, I don't think that they are normal in the sense of like a neutral speaker sounding normal, if that makes sense. I think the closest one there would maybe be like the DT880, maybe. But yeah. Let's keep going. Have you heard any serious contenders to the Susvara? Not yet. The Susvara is like, I was just listening to it again yesterday and the day before, because I set up like a whole bunch of different headphones in the studio space to have some folks compare. Some folks who hadn't necessarily heard all those headphones. So I had like the Susvara, the Expanse, I had the LCD5. What else? I had the Elite. So a lot of like flagships, and a couple others as well. And the Susvara was just like clearly better than all of them. It was not close. And it's like without EQ. Like I'm not like when I'm doing that, like no EQ applied. It's one of those things where you listen to it, like unless you actually listen to it, it's hard to really describe that sort of sense of like kind of effortlessness that it gives you. And I really do think that that's an FR thing. Like it's just got a really good balance for its FR. Yeah, and Bravura is in that conversation too because it's also very balanced for its tuning. But I still found the Susvara to be like a little better, like a little bit more effortless. Yeah. Like, I actually don't think that the Susvara is the most technically impressive headphone that I've heard. Like, I think the L700 is more detailed, more resolving, all that stuff. But the FR on that one is kind of weird, and you can tell it's kind of weird. Whereas the Susvara is like it's that all arounder kind of like great combination of all the things that I care about. Yeah, it doesn't have the greatest dynamics, sure, but it is the god headphone for me. Let's keep going here. Yeah, Ace of Spades says, I like the Radiance, but ultimately kept the Celestia and OG Clear as my focals. I'm not opposed to the deeper V of the Bathys, although that 1K dip is an eye-opener. Yeah, I'm very curious as to like what causes that. I would love to get a little bit more info on that. Yeah, I'd love to get a bit more info on like what causes that, and then do a deep dive into it. I think it'd also be cool if they could implement some, because there's an EQ function in the app. It'd be cool if they could like make something there where you can choose if that's something that you want. Subjectively, like when you listen to it, it's not really that noticeable. I think it is noticeable if you're paying attention to it, because it's not about that region specifically, and it's more about like what that does to the relative balance on either side. And so it is a little bit more, yeah, like it doesn't have quite the same body for certain tones, but there's definitely a lot of clarity there from the upper mids, like at around 3K. So it's not as significant an issue as I think it looks like, I'll put it that way. And then yeah, you get all the emphasis for the bass and lower mids. So largest soundstage and imaging for IEMs. Certainly think these are on the list. Maybe not as large as the Evo Legend X, but like the high end Empire Ears ones are crazy for that. I mean, IEMs I find typically don't give me that, like whether it's a psychoacoustic effect or what. But I find generally IEMs are not that soundstagey, but the Empire Ears ones, like the high end Empire Ears ones, definitely are. So it's that's not to say that there aren't other ones. That I haven't heard all of them, right? But of the ones that I've heard, Empire Ears high end ones are great for that. Also, the TF Forte is crazy for soundstage, but in order to achieve that, the FR has to be a bit weird. So I kind of don't really recommend that one. Um, fellow Canadian. I didn't know you're Canadian. There is no closed back alternative made by Sennheiser to the HD600. No, I think the person was asking about just in general, like other headphones, not from Sennheiser specifically. Do you think we'll ever be able to objectively measure intangibles? Well, if it can be heard, it can be measured. Unless it's like placebo, right? One cool new technology is MEMS. Can they compete with upper echelon of the market? Largest soundstage. Z1R, height, U12T. We'll see. The ones that I heard, like, obviously they didn't have any tuning. Like, they weren't, the FR was just, like, there was no, it's all DSP, right? But as far as the technical capability there, yeah, like, I thought that was impressive. Can they compete with the upper echelon? Maybe. For me, the jury's still out on that, but it's interesting at the same time, like the tech. Neumann NDH20, that's super dull sounding and blunted sounding. I would not recommend that one. They do some crazy, like, blanket-like over-damping. Or, like, front damping. I don't know what's going on with those. They just sound very lopped off for trailing ends of tones. Was not into them at all. And it could be because of the, like, lower mid-centric masking. I'm not sure. What was your least favorite headphone at Kanjam SoCal? Except Centaur closed. Alright, least favorite. I honestly didn't listen to that much. Least favorite, like, I really don't like those closed back Audio Technicas, the Auct and Awas. I really don't like those. um, so, but I mean, those are also closed backs as well. I feel like those are more like they're trying to be art pieces, like with the wood cups, or like the designed wood cups. What else? I mean, I'm trying to think if there's something in IEMs that I really didn't like, but I can't really think of it. I mean, I did try a bunch of stuff, but I was not. There wasn't that much stuff that I hadn't heard already. I think for me, one of the bigger disappointments was The Expanse. I don't think it was the worst thing I heard though. Yeah, yeah. I'd say probably those Audio Technica closebacks. um, yeah, like even the Spirit Torino stuff didn't really. It wasn't like it sounded pretty weird, but there was something interesting going on there that I was like, okay, well that's kind of cool, you know. Um, oh no, I have an answer. It's that campfire trifecta. That thing was like, what the hell? The Supermoon was pretty good, I thought. It's a bit sharp in the treble, like it's a bit wrong sounding in some areas of the treble, but I thought the Supermoon was very interesting. But the trifecta, no. Could not handle that one. The wonk was real. Um, Sundara closed? Yeah, no. It's the trouble. The issue is that the treble is wrong. That's the way I'm going to describe things now. Like, never mind using subjective audiophile terms. It's just that it sounds wrong. um, will you review and measure more e-stats like stacks? I would love to. It's just hard to get them, right? It's hard to get them in for review. Um, yeah, I would love to review that L700 because that thing is nuts. Um, I'm glad you like the LCD-X with the EQ profile. Remember to dial it in for your own, taste as well, though, because that is the most important thing. If you're gonna, you might as well make it, suitable for you. If you've been using the Utopia 2022, that's a bit like cheating. Yeah, yeah, the dip. I think it is audible, like I was saying. I don't think it's as audible as it might look, but I do think it is audible. Um, any ideas on how to EQ the highs in LCDX? That's good. You're gonna have to do that by ear, but I recommend using like some. There's a bunch of tools for this, but where you can basically do like sine tone or tone a tone generator where you can track the cursor, so you can actually kind of go and see, okay, what is the where are the issues, right? But it does get difficult to EQ the highs. Yeah. I see some donations. Thanks, guys. Um, any updates on our headphone? Um, like this thing? Any updates on it? Not really. I mean, it's one of those things where there's still stuff going on in the behind the scenes. We were intending to have some prototypes at Kanjam because the idea behind this is kind of more as like a research project than anything else because I've been trying to think about like, okay, how can I figure out what some of the intangible qualities are in headphones if I don't like it feels like a little bit like we're grasping in the dark, right? Like we don't have any concrete foundation to test this stuff. Um and getting into dialogue online isn't really that helpful, I find, because you inevitably end up in mudslinging contests. And I really just wanted to kind of get into like, okay, well, what is it about different diaphragm materials, different designs, that contributes to these qualities, and you know whether it's in FR or not. And I was hoping to try and be able to correlate it with FR. Unfortunately, that didn't end up happening. The one thing I can say is so yeah. Anyways, the point being that like, um, it, we were hoping to have some prototypes at Kanjam because like the other side of it is that like I'm just one person, right? So I wanted to get some feedback from the community to see what people liked best, for the different, like we had everything the same except 3 different diaphragm materials, um, and I wanted to see what other people thought was the best and if it all lined up with the one that I thought was the best because I had a clear preference for one of them. But at the last minute, something came up and we weren't able to actually get those units to Kanjam. So maybe we'll still use this. We'll still do something. I'm not sure what we're gonna do for that, to try and get a little bit more sense of that. And but as far as like what the findings are for me so far, um, there does seem to be somewhat like the one diaphragm material was clearly the best, I thought. Um, it had basically full bass extension, and it also didn't have any of the driver mode, or like we've called them wibbles, and you see them with some of the Hi-Fi Man headphones as well because the drivers are so huge on those ones. But they're the sort of like little wibbles that you sometimes see also on e-stats. You see them anything with sort of large plane like drivers diaphragms. You see those sort of like kind of jagged wibbles in the mids, and ordinarily you don't really hear that. Like it doesn't come across as like jagged or ragged. It's just that's kind of how it measures. But there were some where those were significant, and there were other drivers where other diaphragm types where they were non-existent or nearly non-existent. And I found that for whatever reason, the ones that were non-existent, they sounded better to me. But it's hard to know if it's hard to say that's really what's responsible, right? Because then you look at like some of the Hi-Fi Man headphones that have those, and they also sound amazing. So, um, yeah. So I think, I don't know. Right now, I'm kind of at a still a little bit unclear what is the contributing factor there to goodness. But yeah, we're gonna keep, I guess, trying to figure it out, one way or another. And I just think it'd be cool to do that with actual, headphone drivers. And the cool thing about that is that like there's no bias for like how much something costs. So people, if people get to try them, they don't know how much it costs. So it's a bit more of a judgment that's free from framing effects. There are obviously still, you can't completely eliminate bias, but yeah, I'm just going to address some of the contributions here. TechMed, thank you. Let me know if you have a question. That's that's very generous. Exions, do you have any info on Moondrop's Moon Zero headphones? Nope. Any thoughts on it? Do you think they are going to be any good considering Moondrop's great tuning? I think they stand a chance of being good. I know that what was the one, the Void? That one was not that well received. I think it was the Void. Whatever the white one was not that well received. We actually have one in the studio, but I think it was not well received enough where Moondrop decided not to release it or to go back to the drawing board or make some changes. I'm not sure. Maybe they're gearing up for a re-release. So yeah. But Moondrop is a company that could very well do something good in that space. Travis, can I ask the chat what headphone they would recommend for someone who adores the MDR Z7 headphone? I bought Campfire Cascade, but don't really like it. Thanks. I'll leave that up to you guys. Rob, thank you. Is the Oracle Mark II the Utopia 2022 of IEMs when considering an upgrade from the OG? No. The Oracle Mark II is brighter than the original considerably, whereas the Utopia 2022 is warmer than the original by just a little bit. Let's see. I've missed a lot of your guys' comments here, but I'm just kind of going back to check them out. DMS had a really low opinion of The Expanse. Your thoughts? Yeah. I was disappointed, to be honest. It's like I was comparing The Expanse directly with the Noir. I think the Noir is better. The Expanse just it doesn't work for me. The new DCAs, the new flagship ones, like I don't know if it's a tuning thing or a wearing situation, positioning thing. They just don't work for me. And I think the Noir is still my favorite of the DCA headphones. With EQ, LCD5 can't compete with Susvara in general. No, I think the LCD5 can. It's just that without EQ, the Susvara's tuning is just like it's got that sort of like unveiling, unmasking effect. Yeah, it's not as like exciting because it doesn't have a bass shelf, but it's one of those where it's got all of that refinement, and that's why I love it. I don't have a take on Apple lossless. I don't use Apple. I mean, I use this because it's amazing, but I use Android. Kanjam, did you loud for critical listening? Yeah, except for in the Warwick booth because they had that sound, it wasn't soundproof, but sound isolating booth. Good upgrade from the DT 1990. Many things. K371. No, good upgrade from the DT 1990. Sundara Edition XS. Clear. those ones are pretty good upgrades from the DT1990. If you like lots of treble, like if you like the DT1990, maybe, well, I don't know. I'm trying to think if there's something else that's more trebly. The Aria, the Hi-Fi Man Aria Stealth would be a good upgrade. I think that there's a price drop on that one recently. Disregarding logic isn't the point of reviewers. I don't know if I understand your question. Disregarding logic isn't the point of reviewers to review stuff. I imagine so. What is the point of reviewers if all they do is review the same hype stuff? I mean, I tend to agree that we should be, reviewing everything that comes across the desk. I think the problem though is that you have to also cater to what people want you to be covering, and if there's a trend or a particularly popular topic that people want you to address or cover, it's like you're kind of serving the community in that sense, or at least trying to. And I often fail at that, admittedly. I review stuff because I'll see somebody a bit, saying, "Oh, this is the best thing ever," and I listen, and I'm like, "No, I have to like warn people about this." Like the gold planer thing was a good example. Yeah, so oftentimes it's because I have a particular axe to grind, or there's something that bothers me about a narrative that I feel needs to be corrected. That's a motivator for sure. But I think in general a lot of it is unfortunately also because you're serving an audience. You're trying to you're basically implicitly asking people, hey, what do you want us to cover? And not even implicitly, like, we'll come out and say it. Hey, tell us what you want us to cover. And the more demand we get for a particular thing, the more interest we know there will be in it, and the more likely we are to cover it. I think that's just the reality. And it's not just for us. I think it's for any reviewer. Do you prefer the L700 over the 07? Honestly, yes. I would just EQ it, like I'd EQ the hell out of it. But I need to get one in. That's the thing. What do you think of the Abyss Diana TC? Yeah, it's all right. I thought it was. I only heard it at a show. I didn't get one in, but yeah, I thought it was better. Like one of the better tuned Abyss ones. So yeah. All right. I'm just gonna catch up here, guys. Otherwise, I'm answering questions that are like 5 minutes old. So if I missed your question, ask it again. Symphonium Helios, a solid IM to get. Yes, if you can handle the awkward fit. It's a large IM, and its shell is a bit brutish. The Meteor is a smaller shell, but yeah. Hype killer for what? I mean, that's the other thing, is like, and Kanjam really made this, clear for me, is that like there would be stuff that I mentioned this before, like there'd be stuff that I listened to at Kanjam where I'd go like, okay, this thing is clearly better than that thing. People are comparing things, and I was hanging out with people who are deep into this hobby, like very deep into it, and they had the complete opposite opinion of what I did. And so I thought either we hear these very differently, or people are just super into different things. Like they're looking for very different things. And so the thing that it might not work for me, it might not sound right for me, for whatever it is. You see, you're talking about the DT1990, or maybe we're talking about the Expanse. It might be the perfect thing for somebody else, right? And that's kind of how I mean, so me saying like, oh yeah, it's not for me, like that's not to say that the people who like it are wrong, okay? And then similarly, if I think something is great, that's not to say that the people who don't like it are wrong. It's just that, for me, I happen, like the Susvara, I think is fantastic. And it's not for everybody. But yeah, I obviously think that it's better, but that's just the way that, personal opinions work. How is the expanse for technicalities in comparison to the LCD5? I didn't actually do that comparison. I did it with the Susvara, and it was very clear which one was better. But with the LCD5, I would say the LCD5s are probably better. Yeah, I would put the expanse closer to. Like, my main issue with the expanse is there's good things there in terms of instrument separation, but the soundstage is like very strange sounding to me. It's very strange sounding soundstage. And ordinarily I don't care that much about it, but this was enough where I cared. They don't work for people with glasses or less hair. There you go. That's the reason. Yeah. No, actually, I have glasses with really thin arms that I use when I'm not doing this. Because yeah, the glasses generally have an impact on the frequency response of many headphones that require kind of like a seal. But I do also use in-ear microphones to make sure that I am getting a good seal and that my subjective takes are congruent with what I see in the graph. I don't always post them because oftentimes they match. It's just that if they don't match, then it's worth pointing that out. But yeah, that's what the in-ear microphones are for. It's to get a sense of, well, basically everything below 400 hertz to see, you know, if the coupling is good. 400, 500 hertz, something like that. All right, guys. I think now is the time for spicy hour. I know some of you guys are going in, so let's go. Yeah, I think actually I would expect that opinions on the LCD5 and the MM500 would be very all over the place, because the tuning, like, for both of them is a little bit shouty, more shouty on the LCD5. But for some people, like, depending on their ear canal, that's probably going to be okay. For me, it's definitely too much upper mids. Like, the relative balance with the treble needs to be a little bit more even on both of them. But I found that on the MM500, it was close enough to where I didn't always feel the need to EQ. Like, for certain recordings, like jazz tracks and stuff like that, like, it was pretty good. As soon as I started listening to more aggressive music, though, and like upbeat music, I was like, nah, like, or like certain vocals that would come across a little glary. I found I needed to even out that balance a little bit more with the treble. But you know, when people hear those at these events, at Kanjams and stuff like that, I think they have a hard time separating any sense of the intangibles with the tonal balance, and that's why I think. I mean, we, like Kryn and I and many other reviewers, we sort of evaluate it in terms of this kind of like fence sitting. Like, here's the things I can correlate with, you know, the frequency response and the tuning, and here's the things that I can't, the subjective stuff. And I think that, you know, unless you're like really deep in like really in tune with how things measure and you understand how they measure, it's difficult to do that. It's difficult to separate these things in that way. So I think that's maybe, you know, one of the challenges that we as reviewers need to do a better job of communicating what we're able to correlate with the tuning, with what we see on the graph, or with how we hear it in terms of the tonal aspects, and what we think are sort of the intangibles. Because yeah, that was another key takeaway for me from Kanjam, is that like there are, like, when you talk to people after listening to stuff, it's like, oh yeah, there's a lot of blending of these things that happens for people. And it makes sense because this is a subjective thing, right? Like, when you listen to it, you're like, oh yeah. Like, a great example of this would be like treble precision. Treble precision, it might sound like it's a technical thing, but that's very clearly also a tonal thing. And oftentimes it can be conflated. Scott, thank you. What's your favorite salsa recipe? Also, I like the Empyrean more than the Susvara, and I don't really know why. Madness. That's madness. Oh, Expanse. Sorry, I thought you said. I thought this was an Empyrean. See, but there you go, right? Like Scott likes the Expanse better than the Susvara, and I think that's crazy, personally. But he likes it, so it's one of those things where it's like what works for me and what doesn't work for me isn't necessarily how it's going to be for you. All I can do is my best at trying to give you one man's opinion. I think that's sort of all reviewers are able to do. And that's really also why it's important to use the graph. I think, like when I posted the measurements of the Expanse, just because it doesn't work for me doesn't mean that it isn't going to be generally well received by probably most people, right? I think that's because if you look at the graph, it's very target compliant. So, favorite salsa recipe? I don't know. I like spicy stuff. I like it when it's like really spicy. What is it true? Wait, hold on. There's another spicy take from Ace of Spades earlier on. Planar IEM and Ribbon AMT driver headphones offer the largest upside of near-term sound quality progression improvements. Interesting. It's funny because I'm not that into planar IEMs, to be honest. I like planar over-ear headphones, but planar IEMs, I haven't heard one yet where I'm like, oh yeah, that one's for me. It's like especially the new popular thing with the budget ones. Like, yes, they are impressive. Yes, they are technical. Like the Timeless is a technically impressive, thing. It's just not for me for the tuning. It's too much of that treble zing. I can't get into it. So they might be. I'm not going to disagree with that take, but it's still not quite for me yet. I still think there's some distance to go there. Is it true that you have a bespoke cloak made of acoustic metamaterial? Jesus Christ, dude. If now I want one. All right, Chef Steve. In order to be a headphone reviewer, your job application on your job application, you should need to provide a hearing result test, a bit like how I need to show trade certificates to get a job. Well, to counter that though, just because you can hear up to 19K or 20, whatever, like 8, in my case it's like 17K, right? Like I'm at the age where it's not it's not all the way up to 20K or 19K, but just because you can hear up that high doesn't necessarily mean you know what stuff should sound like. And I would argue that having a lot of familiarity with the way that instruments sound in real life, or the way music is like you have a lot of experience in music playback, being in studios and stuff like that, or another example would be having a strong background of familiarity with audio science. I think those are things that matter a lot more than how high your ability to hear is. Real audio reviews. Let's go. Headphones need to get a lot better. It's sad people talk about HD600. That's 30 years old. IEM market is doing much better. Yes, but the IEM market has to contend with these. I agree with you, but I like this stuff is the Apple AirPods Pro 2. I actually think that the Chinese manufacturer IEM market should be very worried about this, because this is so good that the distance between you're not really, like, if you're spending the same amount of money on wired IEM, yes, you can get better sound quality than this, but the gap is much smaller than it used to be. And the convenience and all the rest of it is just, it's there. So I really think that, it's true that the IEM market is doing much better as far as bringing high quality sound to a wider audience, right? Because it's cheaper and cheaper. And by no means is this going to override the $100 to $150 segment. That's still, you're still going to get great value there. But I do think that in that part of the industry should be a little bit more worried than for over-ear headphones, because for whatever reason, over-ear headphones, like there hasn't been like a major player that's produced something that's, again, outstanding the way that Sennheiser has, right? Or, you know, the Hi-Fi Man has with the Susvara. Those are still sort of the kings in that space. Let's see. Did you notice any former test subjects lurking around the periphery of Kanjam? Former test subjects? Former test subjects. What do you mean by that? It's nice that you're finally realizing the destructive interference from most planar headphones are a real issue. No idea what you're talking about with that. Destructive interference? No, I just think planar IEMs are very difficult to tune. I mean, IEMs in general are a thing that, you know, because the manufacturer has to assume more about your anatomy because it's interacting with less of your anatomy, it's difficult for them to necessarily get it right. It's a challenge. Oh, Harman test subjects. Oh, I see what you mean. No, probably not. I really enjoyed the talk from like that kind of format. I think it'd be cool for more discussion around that kind of stuff. It'd be great to see Sean there at some point, because I don't think he's far. Like, he's in California, so it'd be great to see Sean at a Kanjam, especially SoCal, right? He could just like walk around and like be like, all right, this is, you know, this doesn't match the target, and just like, you know, dunk on all the headphones there, but. All right, I'll keep going here for another 30 minutes. Let's go more spicy takes, guys. Spicy takes. Give me the spiciest. The IEM market is confusing and oversaturated mess. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I get what you're saying there. There's a lot. There's a lot of stuff coming out, but I also think that because it's oversaturated, it's just more competitive. Is it wrong to be 30 years old? Yes. No, I'm kidding. The DCI Stealth is my daily driver. I learned to appreciate for what it is, but dynamics remains a big issue. See, yeah, but like, decide what's important to you, you know? And think about what's important to you is kind of how I would put it. And it's not bad to, like, people, I see this all the time, like with headphones that you know, headphones that I wouldn't expect would be, you know, universally well received. And then you if you start reading the forums, you find that, like, for somebody it's like, wow, this is like the best thing ever, you know? So it all just depends on what you value, what you care about, the qualities you're listening for. And there's no universal kind of like, there's no universal thing that, you know, that we know everybody is going to care about. I think at the very least having some sort of ear gain is probably the closest to that. But, you know, some people like the old Odysseys, for example, too. What would you say the AirPods Pro 2 matches in general sound quality and wired IEMs? Probably somewhere around $100 to $150, something like that. That's probably where I'd place it. If I just heard that in wired mode, somewhere around there. Yeah. The M scaler is DLSS of audio. I don't have an opinion on that thing because I haven't tried it. Is the AirPods too competitive with the Dusk? Like, for sound quality, I kind of no. The Dusk is still better. Yeah, But it is the distance is getting smaller and smaller. Um, Other true wireless, no. Like the other true wireless, like there are other ones that are good, but like for the most part, true wireless ones are not great. But these ones are very good. I'll put it that way. Spicy Tick, if you have a HE400 SE, Sundara isn't a significant upgrade, so you shouldn't upgrade till Edition XS level of Hi-Fi Man if you want a better planar. It all depends on what people are willing to spend. Kind of disagree with that. Like, I mean, I agree that there's diminishing returns that kick in, but the Sundara is definitely better. Like, there's no question. It gets more tricky if you are comfortable doing EQ, because then, yeah, I can see that argument. How do you feel about the Samsung Buds Pro and 2 Pro versus the budget IEM market? I gotta be honest, I'm not really a fan of the Buds 2 Pro. Well, I like them a lot better than the Pixel Buds Pro, because the Pixel Buds Pro sound truly awful. The Buds 2 Pro sound a lot more normal there, but there's something in the treble that just is not right on the Buds 2 Pro. And the like regular Buds, or Buds Pro, I haven't heard them. So, I know Corinne made a video saying the Buds 2 Pro are the best true wireless, period. No. No. I'm not an Apple user. I lament the fact that I do not use Apple devices, but this thing, it kicks the shit out of the Buds 2 Pro. I'm sorry. In terms of both sound quality and form factor, and form factor no, but in terms of sound quality and convenience and features and all that stuff, it's not close. So with all apologies to Sean Olive and the Harman Target, no, the AirPods Pro 2 is better. U12T in 2022, hell yeah. It's still one of my favorites. Like, for me, it's between U12T and the Odin here. Why do you think Sennheiser aren't making closed-back headphones in the $500 and under range? There's a market for that, considering their open backs are so popular. Kind of agree, but it's also much more challenging to do. Spicy Take. Headphone channels don't show frequency response graphs. Headphone channels that don't show frequency response graphs are like weather channels that don't show maps. I mean, I'm fine with subjective reviewers. I'm fine with objective reviewers, people who just focus on that. What I don't like is when people do the let's look at a graph and review a headphone without ever having heard it thing. I think that's nonsense. Because you don't know how it's going to interact with your own HRTF. It's a simple fact. Like, you don't know what the coupling is going to be like for you, and you also don't know if how the measurement was done. Like, there are some people who measure, just do one seating, and it's like you don't even know if that's going to be accurate. Like, that's not how you do that. Are established headphone reviewers coming under pressure from a new cadre of upstart punks? I don't know what you mean. Am I one of the upstart punks? Regarding destructive interference, I meant how on your custom headphone you prefer the one with less wiggles. Right, but the problem there is that I don't know if that's because it has less wiggles or fewer wiggles, right? Like, driver mode issues, as far as from the development standpoint, the driver mode issues cause problems for when you're trying to shape the tuning a certain way with pad development, because they're a feature that you kind of have to contend with. Whereas if you have like a generally linear, performing driver, it's very as many drivers often are, in free air, let's call it. It's not actually that challenging to get it to sound good. It's generic pads will get you into a reasonable ballpark, there. But if you have some of the driver mode issues and features going on, it can be a little bit more challenging. Pretty rock thumbnail. I wanted to do a different thumbnail for this, but I ran out of time, and I took a bunch of photos of the Odin over on my little shelf here, and I hated them. So I was like, I'm just gonna go with one of the old ones. It's not a very eye-catching thumbnail, and I recognize that like people who don't know what IEMs are, or people who think, oh, I saw that as a post like on I think it was on Reddit or somewhere. Someone was commenting on wired IEMs as like headphones on a string, which I thought was amazing. But yeah, like people looking at this thumbnail will be like, what is that? Is it jewelry? Maybe it is. Reviewers need to start a project to establish an improved language and description around sound to push the hobby and general understanding along. Actual researchers won't do something so hazy. All right, that's a great topic. So, you know how like if you go into certain places, they will say, "Oh, what your description of resolution and detail or dynamics or whatever, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean anything. Like, what is it?" They'll always throw those questions out at you, right? They're trying to bait you into saying that you don't know, because it doesn't necessarily anchor to anything in particular. However, this is a language problem, which is why I used Wittgenstein in the tier list for audiophile terms. It's just a language problem, right? Like, when I say that, hey, this is more detailed than that, you guys know what I'm talking about, generally. And I would argue that probably the majority of people who are interested in this hobby know what I'm talking about. For people who actually they've experienced it, know what I'm talking about. However, and just because we can't anchor it to a measurable phenomenon or measurable thing doesn't mean that communication hasn't occurred, right? So if those questions were being put to reviewers, like subjective statements, right, in good faith, the answer would be, well, let me just take you over to this section of the internet where everybody knows what the hell I'm talking about, right? So to a certain extent, I agree with what you're saying there. Like, and it has been attempted before, and that's, I think, why there is a common vernacular or a common kind of like there's a common rhetoric among not just reviewers but people who are within this space. Whether it's Discord communities, forum communities, there's a common rhetoric there that gets used that we understand. And even though we may disagree about the minutia or about what various different specific things mean, I would argue that communication does occur, and you are able to get a general sense of, hey, X is better than Y, at least according to that person. Now, they could be wrong because human fallibility, and that's really where there's an argument for needing more than just subjective takes, and I think that's really what we need. That's why it's important to show the graphs, right? As someone else was saying, it's like not having a map, right? But to keep running with the map analogy, it's like if the map doesn't match the terrain, right? It's not the terrain that's wrong. But yeah, I would love for there to be more research done in this domain. I would love for there to be more funding for research to be done in this domain. To really figure out what the frontiers of audio are and sound and I mean, it could even be framed in terms of listener preference, but I actually think that there's a difference in samples, right? Like, who knows? But I'd love for that to be further investigated and made public. If Sean's watching, let's make it public. If you took the sound quality of K371 and put it in a Focal build quality, would you have better close back than a Focal currently offers? What? No. I think it would be cool if you could get a K371 style of tuning with the Focal driver. That'd be cool. I guess the Radiance is kind of close to that. Yeah, no, I get what you're saying. The K371 feels like a cheap toy. I wish it were like built like an M50X. Anyone would just EQ their AirPods into Susvaras. Yeah, I mean, if you could, that's really what it is too, right? It's like if you could, everybody would be doing that. Or not even AirPods, right? Like you could if you could EQ an MDR 7506. This is Metal 571's point from a long time ago. If you could EQ an MDR 7506 to sound like a Susvara, everybody would and should be doing that. And unfortunately, you can't do it. And then somebody will inevitably come along and say, "Oh yeah, but that's because the distortion character is different." It's like, yes, but the research also shows that the distortion, like the harmonic distortion, doesn't really matter unless it's awful. So decide. You can't just cherry pick the research. You have to take it all. Did you know those Hyphaman stealth magnets aren't so stealthy and transparent sounding? The stealth magnets are just rounded edges to the magnets that have an effect on 12K, or like the upper treble, like above 10K. That's all it is. And did they need that? I don't know. I would argue probably it's not necessary. But it gives you here's the thing about the stealth magnets. What I like about it is that it gives you another potential parameter to use. I do think though, however, it's been applied a little bit liberally, and there are situations where it's not necessary, and it's getting introduced because that's what they're set up to produce now. I expect. I don't know for sure, but I expect. So, stealth magnets. It is not a. It's a cool thing. It actually does have an acoustic impact, even if it's minor, but it is not like a major, massive game changer like what some people might think. If you could blind test headphone, oh yeah, okay, I see what you're saying. Headphones feel different on the head, which would make testing no longer blind. Yeah, that's the problem. But you could do things as mentioned in the last live stream that if you just took, like if you took a Deva driver and put it into Susvara chassis, right? You could do stuff like that. Or maybe, yeah, there's other examples where you could do that. Can you pick the difference between FLAC and DSD? I just stream. I would love to use Qobuz if I could. I miss my Qobuz account, but can't today. Why do reviewers have such a different take on technicalities, specifically with imaging? I've seen drastic different takes on the HD Zeus and R70X with Crin, DMS, etc. Well, I actually think that by and large, if you look at Crin's like list, and like, I'm not saying if you asked people about Crin's list, I'm saying like if you compared Crin's list to what you'd ask people generally, like what their impressions were, more likely than not, you would have people ranking technicalities similarly. I'm not going to say the same because there are definitely places where they're bound to disagree, but the more you increase, the more, at the very least, you would get a similar spread for high and low, or for good and bad. So the trend would be in a predictive direction. I'll put it that way. But there is also a reality that because of everybody's unique HRTF, we actually do hear these things differently, or potentially, and so that could explain. There could actually be a different FR result at the eardrum in those examples. So. I know how much you love the A90. However, passion for sound said the sound is lifeless, sterile, spatially flat, and dynamically flat. So there should be a measurable virility, fertility, and measurement for it. Oh man, that was a great comment. Yeah. Detail-wise, is the Bathys comparable to the Radiance? I mean, maybe in USB DAC mode. I mean, what is comparable? Like the same? I think the Radiance still has a better FR. So all this means Amir is right about everything. What? He doesn't use adjectives like airy and holographic. We're all clear on what he's saying in his reviews, even if we don't agree. No, he does use subjective terms. Like if you read his reviews, he does use, he says things are high fidelity. Well, what does that mean, right? Like you can play that same game with anybody, is what I'm saying. And so to try and dismiss people's or discredit people's takes because they use language that other people understand just because you don't understand it is nonsense. Right? Like especially when there's information given that you do understand. It's kind of like what I was saying before about like serving an audience. Like the majority of people out there don't know what the hell I'm talking. Like if I'm talking about ear gain and scrutinizing the level for upper mids or the balance for harmonics between upper mids and treble, the majority of people have no idea what the hell I'm talking about. So, you can take that same argument and apply that lens, the other way. But if I'm talking about, soundstage, people have experienced spaciousness headphones before, and they will know what I'm talking about. On this topic, actually, for those who haven't read it and you're curious as to why I have this perspective, read an article by Frank Jackson called "What Mary Didn't Know," because the idea is basically you can have all of the technical knowledge in the world that you might want. Like you can read up on all the research, you can read up on the literature, you can actually understand acoustics, all you want, but there is additional knowledge gained by actually having the experience of a thing. So there's something gained by actually experiencing it, and this is the main reason why I think those people who are just looking at a graph without ever having listened to the headphone, and they're just making judgments about something by pointing at the graph and saying this is good, this is bad. That's why that's bullshit. It's one of the reasons why that's bullshit. Hey, Chris, good to see you. There's a good deal of research regarding anatomy and sonic preference and how we hear things. An example is neck thickness and how that affects interpretation of bass. I haven't read that one, but that's pretty interesting. Neck thickness. Yeah. Neck strength. In that sense, like I like to watch a lot of Formula One, and have you noticed this? But like all the Formula One drivers have like the strongest neck muscles because they're constantly like needing to like use them when they're racing. So maybe they hear things differently. That'd be interesting. I was just saying how Hyphenman markets their magnets as transparent when there's clearly some issue causing the wiggles. That's less to do with magnets and more to do with the fact that the diaphragms are huge. I mean, to a certain extent, I suppose it does the magnets have an effect on this. A more even application of the magnetic field, right? And this is it would potentially get rid of that. But this is one of the things that Odyssey did that was cool with their parallel uniforce, where basically they did. Well, it's not quite that clear cut, I'm told. Like you could still have wibbles or those sorts of driver modes with double-sided headphones too. So I guess it's not fair to say that. But interestingly, on one of the ones that we were working on, it didn't have those wibbles, and many of the other ones did. And the only thing we changed was the diaphragm material. So it's the effect of the diaphragm material. Amir might be deaf. Jesus Christ. We should have him on the live stream at some point. Amir, if you're watching. I'd break the internet. Yeah, I have no idea how loud that guy listens. I have no idea. But to care about 114 dB stuff, no. At least I don't care. All right, let's 10 more minutes, guys. Let's go. Alonso especially, yeah, that dude has a crazy thick neck. Yeah, let's go for some more spicy takes here, guys. So I also don't like this distinction of objectivist and subjectivist. I know that that's kind of the way that people think about it, but like I don't really think that the only difference there is like what people are focusing on in their judgments, right? Like people don't I imagine don't think that it's some sort of magic that's causing them. It's just that they're talking about their experiences, less about, acoustic behavior on a measurement rig. And I think it's fine. Like that doesn't. Those are like ships passing in the night. Like you can do both. That's why I respect what Kryn does, right? That's why I also am a fence sitter, right? Where I'm like, okay, I'm going to talk about on the one hand, I'm going to talk about what my experience is like with the thing, which is a subjective thing necessarily, and I'm also going to talk about how this performs on the rig and shows frequency response and talk about the frequency response. Right, those are not incompatible things, and to treat them as incompatible is a little bit ridiculous, in my opinion. And also to overly focus on one is a bit ridiculous, in my opinion, because if you are making a judgment about a thing based solely on your experience, you're omitting facts about this thing that will be highly relevant to the wider audience who you're ideally trying to communicate to. And if you're omitting your experience, you're also like not giving a full account of how a thing actually sounds when worn on the head. Even if it's just one person, that still matters. So I think it's actually crazy to not include both. Like, I think it's more that there are people who get riled up about, they're like, oh yeah, like I believe in science, and therefore, it's like, of course, like of course this stuff is all real external physical acoustic properties or placebo. But like again, if it can be heard, it can theoretically be measured. So like there's no extra layer in between again, I'm an externalist, right? So I think there isn't an extra layer in between the external phenomena and my the internal things going on as far as my experience is concerned. If you had to choose, if you had a choice of being objective or subjective, which one would you pick? Again, I would love it if I could perfectly correlate everything from my experience in a predictive manner on a graph. I can't do that, so but I would love it if I could. So yeah, objective, I think. And also, it's way easier to be like to only focus on measurements. Like that's way simpler. Misses a lot, but yeah. Race car drivers have thick necks to stop their heads from flying off during collision. Jesus Christ. Pure objectivists are good because they force pure subjectivists to not talk deeply questionable BS, which many are really happy to do. So I do think there's an element of too much waxing poetic about things, you know, where it's like let's find some sensible middle ground here, you know. But I don't think it's a matter of like we need like the poison of one requires the antidote of another extreme. I think both extremes are bad, and the people who, you know, go super hardcore either way. Okay, I'm just gonna. What are you doing, dude? That's enough. But I think you get the idea. People's taste and understanding of sound needs to develop over time, and very often someone deep in the hobby has little to offer in recommending stuff for beginners since you can't skip steps. It'd be nice. Well, I think I definitely agree with the first part of your statement there. And I think to a certain extent, like if you're just talking about things that are personally interesting to you, you're going to. It's going to alienate people for whom that's not relevant. So I can see why you say that. Science doesn't discount qualitative observation. Many important discoveries come from that. Yes. Yeah. And it is a problem to, you know, blind buying is an issue. All right, I'm just gonna time to remove that. But doesn't the reviewer's critical listening library have a huge effect on his subjective impression? A guy on YouTube, we all know, only listens to rock and rap. His impressions have to be limited. I do think it has an effect. Yeah, I do think, like, honestly, I do think genres have an effect on what people's judgments are, and because I think there's probably trends for how people want certain music to sound. The people who are doing this now, I'm just gonna ban them. Why are placebo effects considered invalid when psychoacoustical effects are basically also illusions anyway? So that's an interesting take. I think because in blind tests, ideally, placebo would not play a role. Should you use different ears on measuring rigs so you can best match your own ear size? Potentially. It's so one of the things that we want to do is actually have multiple different measuring rigs with different ears, so we can see how headphones change depending on, you know, the rig or the ear that's being used. And this is going to give an indication. We can create some sort of index for, like, you know, this headphone has a larger spread of you know, of differences across users for how it'll sound, given how much more it changes, you know, depending on the ear. I think that'd be pretty cool. I feel like if people engaged more with people like Oratory and Matt Economist, they'd be much more receptive to scientific viewpoints. Yes. Oratory and Matt Economist are my favorite scientists in this space. Science-focused people in this space. I think actually they're both engineers, technically. But yeah, no, they are extremely helpful and great to talk to. I will say I disagree with both of them on a number of things, but I think they also disagree with each other on a couple of things. So there's but I would suggest, yeah, they are the right kinds of people to talk to if you're interested in the science. 100%. They're the people who I talk to, right? So, and we've had both of them on the live stream. And Matt Economist is someone who I work with, so I have nothing but the utmost respect for him, and also for oratory. I'd love to see you and DMS or any other reviewer to hash out their opinion on a headphone with certain test songs to see what small differences remain. Like on an individual basis, I think that'd be pretty cool. Like we could go through, even live, be like, hey, how do you hear this headphone? Of course, the problem is that univariation is still a thing. But yeah, I think that'd be very cool. Some IEMs graph perfectly like the Crin Zero, but technical performance wasn't that great. How can you objectively or how can objectivity or science help with this phenomenon? Bass texture, tightness, imaging. Yeah, I mean, if it could, if we could, then this debate would go away. I would love it if we could. I think a lot of it is, measurable. I think a lot of, like, my take on a lot of this stuff is that it's a difference of frequency response of the eardrum. And the way that certain things behave, like when you're actually wearing them, right? And like, especially for like, front sealed open bag planars, right? Where, well, any system when there's a system that gets created with the eardrum, right? There's a good chance that, there's a unique result of the FR at the eardrum, and this could explain why certain things are perceived as blunted, or certain things are perceived as punchy or dynamic or whatever, right? And because we can't see that on the graph, it's difficult to to say, hey, this is definitively why. Like a great example is the HiFiMan HE6, right here is a very dynamic and punchy sounding headphone, and it's perfectly linear in the bass, like straight across. I can't explain that. I can't make sense of why that one sounds very punchy and dynamic, and conversely, this Aeon 2 or Aeon X closed sounds particularly dynamically compressed by comparison, and it's bass boosted. I can't explain that, right? I look at the graph, it doesn't tell me that. So unfortunately, there's still something that is missing from our understanding or analysis of frequency response. And it could also be that this is measurable, but it is not currently represented in data at the moment. Like, I'm not saying it's not even frequency response. Like, it could just be frequency response. It's just that it's at the eardrum, and that's the only place you'd be able to measure it. But it's like, we should probably exhaust that before going any further with other stuff. And like, maybe I'm not going to put words in Jude's mouth, but like there was a suggestion from Jude at Kanjam that like maybe there is something to this whole like impulse response thing or non-minimum phase question. Maybe there is something else to it than just FR. The science tells us that it's probably FR, but like we have to be open-minded. We have to test these things. But to get to the point about the graphing perfectly of the Crin Zero, I think that the reason why that one doesn't sound that great is because Harman 2019. I think there's actually an issue with Harman in-ear 2019. Like Jude thinks there's an issue. I think that the issues are different. But like Jude seems to think that it's because of the specific coupler that gets used. And that maybe the 5128 would result in a better result. But yeah, Harman 2019 IEM just sounds wrong to me. And I think we can demonstrate that with Crin's next collab, which I'm very excited for. How do you measure timbre, imaging, and soundstage? That's generally just frequency response. It's not necessarily a specific thing like target adherence, but a relationship for different frequency ranges, or at least you can kind of predict how certain things be received based on frequency response, when in terms of these qualities, because there is certainly an effect on that. I'm not saying it is an exhaustive effect, right? Like maybe there's something else that also contributes, but at the very least that does contribute. And timbre as well, frequency response, is a key contributor there. If not the sole contributor. For what it's worth, my uneducated view is that it's most likely in FR, but the FR at the eardrum is much more nuanced than the average cross graph. Yeah, that's basically what I would say as well. Or like, we don't know what that difference actually is, so it's hard to actually say unless we're using probe mics. And then maybe we'd do the probe mic thing and find that actually it does match, and then we're still at a loss. But we at least need to do that before we rule out frequency response. Reviews on Diana TC and DC Expanse is coming, right? Use to grab your attention. Certainly the Expanse is coming. Diana TC I don't have. That's not on my radar. I'd love to review it, but it's not currently on my radar. Punchiness depends on headband stiffness. You heard it here first. The Sindar closed back is a real flop. You confirm? I didn't like it. I thought it was very weird in the treble. Harmony 2019 is like mega shout and upper and super splashy in the treble. Yeah, I kind of agree. Yeah, it's not great. But maybe again, this is a problem of the smoothing. Could be. And if you look at 2017, there's a very clear measurement artifact there in the treble. So I don't know. I would just, like, honestly, for IEMs and for IEM targets, I would just go with IEF for now, unless there's a reason to go for something else. But I think IEF is the safest, even though I know it misses. It's not great for it's highly smooth. Also, I'll put it that way. But it's what I would use right now. It's probably because the HE6 moves more air in the way it hits your ear, and so there's a potential that it could be something like that as well. That it's like actually a physical effect, but also I think not quite, because when you listen to some of the blunted quality I mentioned on certain headphones is actually something like, it's almost like something that is. Like, when you hear the absence of it, it's not the absence of a physical thing, it's the absence of a tonal property somehow. Like, when I call it, it's like when the trailing ends of tones are lopped off, and they sound like it's like, the analogy I give is like, it's like, looking at a color gradient where there's very few shades in the gradient. That's like when listening to something very blunted to me. And I can mess around with EQ. I can fix the FR in any way, that shape or form that I want, and it still sound, things can still sound blunted. The Drop Panda is a great example of that. And the flip side is you can have headphones like the HE6, or let's go with even a more crazy example, an LCD4, which measures, let's be frank, like a dog's breakfast, and it sounds extremely clear for trailing ends of tones. Well, why is that? What's going on there? I don't know. So... yeah. The blunted quality comes from the bass shape and treble. Most likely, people don't understand treble affects bass a lot. I mean, I agree that it's all about the relative balance and it's a relational thing, but the reason why that's not true is because, I mean, I think there is an element of what you're describing here that I've described, or other people might describe as like a kind of masking effect. I think that's probably true. But there are headphones where like you can EQ them to your heart's content. You can fix whatever you want as far as, you know, the FR is concerned, and it still comes across with that sort of like dulled effect or blunted effect. And again, I use the drop panda as the perfect example of this. Like, it does not matter what you do with that one. It just, the whole thing sounds extremely blunted. So as far as like the physical acoustic properties, like I do tend to agree with the idea that it is probably something to do with diaphragm compliance and stiffness, like that, making sure that that's, you know, that ratio is right. But where that shows up in frequency response, I have no idea. Have you got a preferred frequency response target you could show us? Like for IEMs? For over ear, I use Harman. For IEMs, I just use reference point of the Audio Oracle because that sounds neutral to me. You're implying that you can fix the treble with EQ, though. You can, subjectively. Well, I mean, it, like, to a certain degree, yeah. Like, I agree with it's also harder to do. But we're talking about things that are like, you know, super fine-grained HRTF adherent features in the treble, right? Because if you're going to be EQing the treble, you have to do that by ear anyways. And yeah, even then it doesn't. It's like there's no getting around that quality. So yeah, and so this is where, like, maybe if we are talking about stuff specifically in the treble, that's really where those differences in FR, the eardrum, could potentially show up. Have you heard about Olive's EQ testing with rain, wind, and pink noise, and all the interesting mad doctoring going on there? Rain? Wind? No? I've tried Olive's EQ. Didn't work for me. I mean, it sounded better than the default FR of that IEM, but it. I think he's gone too far down the rabbit hole of looking. I mean, I'd need to talk to him about this. I don't know if this is what he thinks now, but at the time, I think he was focusing a bit too much on trying to get equal loudness, and I don't think that that's quite right. To a certain extent, though, what he was doing as far as like evening out the peaks and like the loudest parts subjectively, I think is a very interesting thing that people should do, and it's something we should experiment with, because at the very least, like, we need to test the benefits of HRTF matching if we can, and we're not going to get that by just EQing all treble to perfectly graph, you know, to the smooth Harman target. That's not going to happen. So I do think that is potentially one of the frontiers, but trying to make it so that everything sounds like perfectly even for loudness in the treble is not going to end up sounding good. At least I don't think it's going to sound good for most people. The EQ is insanely good. Are you talking about his EQ? I don't know what you're talking about with rain and wind and pink noise. I'm not sure about that. Where those random noises. So, making those random noises sound perfectly natural is probably a better approach, I think, than trying to look for, you know, perfect equal loudness in the treble. So I'll need to check that out. That seems like an interesting premise. I mean, how do you make pink noise sound natural? But rain and wind, sure. Yeah. Do we need measurements that are done over time to have new useful ways to measure aspects of sound? To me, it feels like it has to be so. What do you mean by measurements done over time? I'm not quite sure what you mean by measurements done over time. Do you mean like time domain stuff? Because, yeah, we've gone over that. Somebody's asking about the Meze Advar compared to the IE600. The Meze Advar is just a bit bright for me. It did sound detailed, but it is too bright, I think. For me, at least. It's a V-shaped sound, if you like V-shaped sound. thoughts on getting the Sony IER Z1R. I think it's not for me, but it has good bass. I prefer the U12T. Yeah. I'll need to check out the video. I haven't seen the most recent one. I'm not sure what he's getting up to these days. But I do like that he's testing a lot of stuff, right? I think that's cool. All right, guys, we've been going for almost 2 hours now. So I am going to cut the stream there. Thanks to everybody for hanging out, and I know this next time I'll try and have a better topic. I just wanted to do casual hangout. So yeah, thanks to all your guys' questions, especially the spicy ones. Good to see all your guys' all the regular folks in here, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. We should have a video coming out tomorrow. I'm not sure exactly what it's going to be. It might be the Expanse video. We'll see. But then also we have some stuff on the AirPods Pro 2 coming out, and a couple other things in the works. But yeah, yeah, I will see you guys in the next one. Bye for now. Thank you, Scott.